Call the meeting to order.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
The meeting's been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Alexander. Here. Trustee Nugent. Here. Trustee Johnson
Here.
is attending remotely. Trustee Ranucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
And Trustee Wisniewski.
Just a quick reminder to everybody, this is being televised via Zoom, and we do have one of our trustees attending the meeting remotely, so please, any correspondence needs to go through the microphones. That's also for anyone that's participating in any discussion or citizen participation as well. With that being said, citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01, anyone wishing to address the Village Board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. The subject can be anything, whether on the agenda or not. The Village Board should not engage in a discussion regarding the comments because it was not part of a publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the Village Board due to involvement in an agenda item. With that being said, would anybody like to speak during citizen participation?
Jan Ruskowski, 2959 North Shore Drive. On Monday, September 20th, the Village Board met in closed session with respect to dam and impoundment litigation. Tonight, the third item of miscellaneous business is consideration of recommendation to reject bids received for dam removal project and consideration of rebidding with alternatives. Estimates for the dam repair were overstated. The removal and restoration project severely underestimated. How else could you justify destroying a lake versus completing the repairs in 2016? I doubt that anyone was truly surprised on August 20th when the bids were millions. Yes, millions beyond the budgeted figure. The apparent legal strategy generated in closed session was to rebid the project with alternates. The construction schedule will remain as planned, so the dam destruction portion of the work can occur this winter. This board routinely dips into the reserves when projects go over the budgeted figure. Not this time. No, the dam is blocks from the square and blocks from the airport. The alternatives, which include plantings, landscaping items, and fish habitat enhancements, will never be completed. Note, I don't see fish habitat enhancements on that itemized bid list. The invasive cattails and phragmites will never be addressed and will continue to be a health and safety factor for not only the now swamp dwellers, but also the village residents. Our concern has been the completion of the approved DNR plan. Too many dam removal projects have ended poorly. Andrea Stern at the DNR once assured me that the $400,000 dam removal grant would not be paid until the project was finished. She also assured me that Scott Seeger's informal proposal to do nothing was not an option. I suspect there is little incentive to spend future budget monies on the alternates once the dam is gone. Mission accomplished. At what price? For what benefit?
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else that would like to speak during citizen participation?
Oh, good. Word to the wise for my friends in Janesville. They swallow the bait on dam removal. They got their DNR grant. They're in about $2.3 million right now, and no one could use anything. Check it out.
Anybody else that would like to speak during citizen participation?
Greg Campbell, 2965 South Street. I think we've been very fortunate this dry season that we've been having with the fire hazard that is now a swamp of cattails. The village itself admits that they do not have the proper equipment to deal with the cattails. I'm not sure how they would deal with a fire that got out of control in that same area. And on another matter, would just like to see, I guess, more meetings where there can be open discussion between citizens and the board, not just for a specific item randomly and occasionally, but maybe it could be a monthly or every other month thing where citizens could come and discuss. We could have open discussions, just be, I think, a lot more healthy atmosphere.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak during citizen participation?
Gene Rosmarineski, 2968 Main Street, East Troy. Thank you for taking out the $1,035 fees for the engineering and legal fees off our bills. Thank you very much for that. But I do see there was a discussion at the previous meeting. I'll read it. Attorney Pruitt explained that other communities also operate in this manner and then recapture legal fees at a later date on another special project if needed. He also felt the estimated legal fees are overestimated and the village could capture actual fees in the future. I hope you're not talking about this project because you're thinking about reinstating the fees for that. Those legal fees and the, what do we call this? Whatever, this other thing. Okay, sound like Biden now. The other thing. You will have to post that and have it on your minutes, and you'll have a bunch of people here. So I wouldn't go after us for that. Let's make sure and leave that alone. Thank you very much.
Just quick clarification, that was identifying, capturing those funds through grant funding as well. It wasn't about coming after anybody or individuals. It was about a different capturing of those funds, not through individuals.
It wasn't about this project.
In general.
Okay, well, okay.
Anybody else that would like to speak during citizen participation? Anybody else that would like to speak during citizen participation? Anybody else would like to speak during citizen participation? Okay, we'll close citizen participation and move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second. We'll approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately. We will take the parade off the consent agenda for right now.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the parade.
I would like to abstain from number 2.
I would like to pull number 7.
Since there wasn't a second to my motion, I will restate my motion as I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda minus number 5, the homecoming parade, and number 7.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Jeremy?
So the parade application, I think this is the third one that you guys have seen from the high school. This one is just for the addition of horses, which isn't the issue why I was requesting that this one be pulled. When they made the original application, Main Street was still under construction and they didn't know when that was going to be done. So that's why they had the new route this year. That new route still touches part of the construction at the intersection of Division and Union Street. They are looking to, if we can instead go back to using Main Street as they have in the past, But instead of going up to the square and around the square like they usually do, they want to take a left on Clark Street. The road is paved now and it's good, and then going down to Union Street back to the high school. And I don't have an issue with it. It keeps everybody on pavement, and we don't have to worry about going over any gravel. Jason doesn't have to worry about trying to fill it in real quick just for that hour of that short parade. And I think that's the best idea is use the same route that they've always used, go down West Street, Main Street, and then Main Street to Clark, and take a left instead of, usually they went around the square, and then to Union Street down back to the high school. So all they're doing is they're cutting off that area.
My question on item 7 was with the, in general, with utilities, especially since we had the one malfunction out on the, recreational trail that we were doing over by the pond. I just want to make sure that we, as a village and any entity that we hire, excuse me, that we make sure that we request that the homework gets done, that we check before anything starts to make sure that all these utilities are buried deep enough and properly so that we don't get a big holdup and have to go back and argue about who's going to pay to change it. That's all I want to make sure, that something gets put in there so all of these, the engineers, the companies, the excavators, whatever, everybody's on the same page knowing, let's do our homework before we start. That's all I'm asking.
In that case, I'll make a motion to approve the parade application with the addition of horses and the revised route that the chief just gave us.
I'll second.
Yeah,
I'll second.
I was gonna make a motion to approve number 7 also.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 40?
Make a motion to approve item number 7 in the consent agenda.
Second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right. On to miscellaneous business. Consideration of accepting improvements for Lake Bluff Phase 2.
Okay, so Belinsky is looking for us to now accept Phase 2 of the Lake Bluff development. The streets are completed, the infrastructure is all in. Tim's staff have inspected it all, created a punch list, and the punch list has been satisfied. They still owe us as-built drawings for this phase, which we still have contingency funds for in our guarantee. We do also have the $218,000, which will remain in the escrow account for 1 year for warranty. As you know, they're already constructing homes in Phase 2, but we're recommending that we accept it.
Move that we accept Lake Bluff subdivision Phase 2 infrastructure.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, on to consideration of recommendations to reject the bids received for dam removal project and consideration of rebidding with alternatives.
So as discussed, we did receive the 2 bids, and went back and talked to the contractors about some value engineering to bring this closer to within budget where we'd expect it to go. Had some very good thought processes on that, on how to cut some dollars out of this while still keeping the intent of the project, addressing the cattails, getting kind of what we'd looked for and what we've talked about this entire time, but some different ways to construct that to do that. And obviously with the cutting of funds out of there, there is a rebidding process we go through, have to do that. So it's our recommendation to go through that process to rebid it. Thought is to be back on the street probably within the next week or so, but then opening bids in late in October to
to still hit that, winter construction.
What's your opinion as far as how many bidders you think we might have, considering this job is gonna be coming up towards the end of their construction cycle?
I don't know if we'll get more or less. It'll be a kind of an open question. I do know that the one bidder, that was the low bidder by a significant amount, is very excited about this project, and we're looking forward to this for winter construction, so I expect they'll be back, looking at this project very tightly.
Don't we have to be careful though, Tim, about the changes that we made, so it doesn't look like we're supporting just one contractor?
That's correct. That's why we talked to both contractors to get their input on how best to value engineer this.
How many bids are we gonna get, or who are you going out to?
It's been publicly bid, so it'll be anybody who's qualified that, meets the village, requirements. That wants to bid. It's an interesting bidding environment right now, for sure.
Hey, Tim or Jason, if we, for the two bidders, have we used them for any work before?
I've worked with the low bidder on probably 2 or 3 projects very successfully, so I know them pretty well. The higher bidder I've not worked with directly.
Okay.
The lower bidder was RLP, Tim, correct?
Yes.
So, yeah, Matt, they actually did the airport drainage situation we had a few years back. They addressed that. Much different project in scope, obviously, but they performed well there.
Okay, thank you.
We also have our new form in place to kind of vet these contractors that are coming out and doing work for us within the community. Make sure we don't have any
Correct.
I'll make a motion to reject the two bids and direct staff to rebid.
I'll second that. Excuse me.
the discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to budget review session and direction to staff.
Okay, so I did provide a lengthy memo to the board. I am not going to review the entire memo. Certainly, if you guys have questions on anything I can address the questions. As you guys are aware, with this budget process, we've done things involved in the process with us to do that financial management in conjunction with the budget process. So this was a new format for us. We reviewed capital and brought capital to the board pretty early on in the year, and now you're seeing that for the first time combined with operations. Ellers did provide a presentation for you. I did want to point out in that presentation there was a correct note on one of the pages. Oh, I thought I was screwed.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can't hear you and I lost your video.
Matt, can you hear me right now?
I can. Yeah, that's fine. I just making sure you.
Connecting.
Can you hear Eileen through her presentation right now? Matt?
No.
Matt, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. For some reason, I've lost my screen share. So I'm going to go through this presentation. I know all of you have it on your iPads. In the Ellers presentation, I don't have the page number, but it reviews the well, I'm not sure if we lost the whole meeting or
You're cutting in and out.
Yeah, Matt, we're having some issues with the connection for the meeting, so Eileen is going to do a couple of IT adjustments, and we'll be back
Do you just want to call my cell phone if we can't get it fixed?
Well, it's more the full broadcast of the meeting. I think we're fine with you at this point.
Okay.
Matt, can you hear us right now?
Yes, Ken.
Excellent.
See Eileen too, and now you all.
Okay, let's try this again. So in the Ellers presentation, I am now sharing my screen so you can see what I'm talking about, thankfully. On this 2022 budget slide, he had said that the general fund gap was 28,000. That is incorrect information. You can disregard that. We have a general fund balance. We do not have the capital projects fund balanced at this time. This is a little different than the board's used to because the last several years at this point we were coming to you with a balanced budget. So we're in a little bit of a unique situation this year. As you guys are aware, our levy limits were a lot more constricting this year. We did not have as much net new construction as prior years, probably largely attributed. There was a lack of construction and also the completion of phase 1 in the Lake Bluff subdivision. There were not as many homes being built in that phase.
What was the state limitation on us?
The state limit with the net new construction we had a $9,900, which will not cover wage and benefit increase. So that's very, very small. So that's definitely contributing. We did have some increases in the fire and EMS budget. They were significant. They were about $74,000. Fire chief here to speak, and potentially speak. So he might be able to explain some of those increases. But basically, we are giving you some options for balancing that budget, and I certainly am. I'm going to jump to those recommendations, but I certainly can answer an awful lot of information. And the budget packet alone was 81 pages. So I don't expect you guys to not have questions or. Going to the budget memo, I think the major direction I am looking for from you so that I can bring the budget back for consideration is how we want to bridge that gap this year. The assurances that I've gotten from Ellers are that, first of all, if the board does want to use some prior year surplus capital, first of all, the thing we always discuss is that is the best way to use any prior year surplus as long as we're not But much like your personal finances, you don't want to dip into your savings to pay monthly bills, but if you need to replace a roof on your house, it makes more sense to savings. They said we have very healthy, balances in our surplus funds, so that would be acceptable. I think the thing to note when you're considering that is, next year, I don't anticipate as small of a levy increase. Just walking through the Belinsky subdivision the other day, I saw, 7 new homes. One is just about complete a model. The remainder are framed in, so I think by January 1st, we're going to have close to completion on a lot of those homes, and there were 5 foundation pours. So I think that alone is going to help the levy limits. The loft development is well underway. Their first building's well underway. That's other new construction. So I think we'll see our levy limit a little closer to what it's been, which typically has been about a $25,000 increase in levy, somewhere around there we've averaged. In addition, what we're going to see a huge benefit of that TID 3 closeout next year. That will reduce tax rates, and that will also increase our levy. It's the benefit of that is basically split between the taxpayers and the village's levy. So our levy will go up another $87,000 next year, which is an increase, and we're looking at $9,000 this year. So between net new construction and the TIG closeout next year, I anticipate we'll probably have $100,000 more in levy. Significant for us. So that's one of the options is to fund the deficit from surplus funds. Another is to reprioritize projects. I talked to Jason about that. I know he was kind of looking at projects and coming up with ideas in case the board wants to address it that way. Another thing the board can do is increase the debt adjustment. We always take the minimum debt levy adjustment that's allowable. You are allowed to take a larger adjustment because of the amount of GO debt that is issued for the village. Or, another option, if you don't want to do the full $117,000 from one method, we could do a hybrid approach and use a balance that.
Is there an advantage to doing a combination as opposed to just the?
I think, if you increase the debt adjustment, obviously that increases your levy. So the advantage would be that you could buffer that a little bit, although the tax rate is projected. Okay. But, doing that a little bit rather than putting on the levy is completely. The other thing I have that I'm seeking direction on is the salary adjustments. We had assumptions that we incorporated in the budget, which was an salary structure of 1%. And then you have a certain amount of employees that are considered to be performance range, which are beyond the steps. We incorporated that, we are increases on has been, so I do have the scenarios for the adjustments to the structure would cost the village. Third thing I'm looking for direction on is in the CDA fund, we have reduced the amount that we budgeted for the facade grant program. I reduced it to $12,000, but I want to make sure something for that. We do have money in reserve.
We had any applications for it?
Yes, we had 7 last year. We approved 7 facade grant applications. I'm really excited about some of the improvements. And I've already had 2 phone calls on. Had a very positive reception. The other thing I noted was I just haven't had time to look at some of the equipment things in this boardroom. I want and the board sits. We need some new chairs. We just had Jason before the meeting. So, yeah. I told him DPW really should fix that. But no, we do have some needs in this boardroom. I haven't had time to look at that prior to the budget approval, but we do have some money in our reserves for municipal building. We have other projects like HVAC that anticipate we would have enough to also address that.
that also include the remodeling up in the lobby, the foyer, and what we were talking about for, a couple of the employees got sick or got hurt, and we couldn't do it last winter.
Yes. Yeah, so that money is, in your fund balance, we have funds committed. So we have, funds committed for those projects already, and there still is some remaining. So I think there should be adequate funds to cover.
Okay, because my concern was that if we were gonna spend money on chairs or doing whatever we're gonna do in here, I just didn't wanna cut us short on that.
Correct. And we can always wait till we know those costs. So I guess I'm gonna open this up for discussion, and I'd like to hear what your direction is. Bring this back, the plan would be to bring it back at the next meeting that you give me, and if there are any further, things that we know. A big pending item is the health insurance, and I reviewed that in your memo. So I'd like to bring that back at the 18th for a final look, and then the budget public hearing will be scheduled.
Eileen, what about ARPA funds? Do we have any information on that from the county?
The Village is recipient of ARPA funds. I'm gonna go off of memory, so please don't, quote me exactly on this. But we will receive approximately $400 and some odd $1,000, in ARPA funds. We've already received our first installment of those funds back in July. We, actually in your budget, you may have noted there is a new fund for that. We actually put that in a separate fund because we don't want, I've been watching some webinars on it, and if we incorporate it in the general fund, it could actually subject us to not qualifying for expenditure restraint in the years that we spend the funds. So they've advised that we create a special revenue fund specifically for tracking those funds. So we do have approximately $200,000 thus far that we are holding. Those funds need to be spent by the end of 2024. So I plan to come to the board once I have a better feeling for how they can be spent. We have been waiting on receiving final guidance from the Treasury Department on how to spend the funds. Right now, it sounds like it could be used for some infrastructure projects like utilities and things like that, but there are other options that we can look at that'll be coming forward at us.
So the reason why I started with that question, where I was going, is if we look at their list of capital projects and their priorities, are there ones that are like on the edge there that we could deprioritize? And then if they qualify for ARPA, then we could bring them back in?
If they qualify for ARPA, but my understanding is the qualifications that we're going to have are going to be limited unless we can go through the exercise of proving lost revenue. So the type of, I guess, where I'm going with that is the type of projects that are going to be, that are at the forefront that can be covered are covered usually by your utility ratepayers, not by your taxpayers. So the type of projects we're looking to reprioritize right now would be projects funding by the taxpayers, because that's what.
Yeah. So what projects, I don't know, Jason, if you've looked at your list, like what would, if we just said we're not going to do as many capital projects, what would fall off the list?
Just taking a quick look at it today, I think what my recommendation would be is the stuff in the parks, and don't shoot me, John. Actually, no, I guess now that's Jason. Sorry. That would be where I would probably head to. So we're looking at $25,000 for bathrooms at Playmore, and then a couple of parks with actually they're both safety surface for Mitchell and for the swings at Playmore, and it would make sense to either pull those or leave those in together because they're kind of a bundle project. So that's probably where I would go, would be my recommendation.
The thing I will add to what Jason just said is, of that, I think the Playmore Park bathrooms, we talked about those were going to be funded from prior year surplus, and it was the only project that I think we were funding from prior year surplus in the budget for $25,000. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And we do have funds designated in surplus funds. It is for community service park projects. Right, I showed a balance at the end of just under 195,000.
Sounds like the making of a splash pad.
We're talking about $117,000 we're trying to make up here. 95,000 in projects and only a 25,000 off of the bathroom project. And how much would it be for the surfacing, Jason?
So that's 53,000 for the both.
I think I'd like to see this as simple as possible, and I'd like to see surplus on the general fund end of it, and then have those conversations after we've had a little more education on the ARPA funds on how to have distribution of those dollars. But I would defer this to Matt.
Oh, thank you. Kick it to the guys not in the room.
Congratulations.
I mean, that's where I'm leaning. I hate to say, especially like on playgrounds and stuff, that we would bump out things that are like for safety. And it doesn't get us all the way. I mean, the other thing too is we can always, in the middle of the year, we can see what the bids come back as. And if they come in lower, then we can see how does that help us close this gap. We can hopefully get some clarity on ARPA funds. I just can't believe that what I hear at work is this is it's pretty easy to get it approved. So I'm interested to talk to you more about that, Eileen, offline. But I guess I was trying to follow a little bit, Eileen, your other comment about the debt change. I'm trying to go back to your notes here.
Sure. So for some background, the village is subject to levy limits, and as we talked about, it increased. According to state law, your levy for debt is not subject to levy limits. That is outside of levy limits. So when we fill out that worksheet with the state, we have an adjustment for any of the levy that is. So that's outside of those levy limits. So it is a way that you could increase the levy, because what we do is we take our minimum adjustment that's allowed. We aren't taking any more than the minimum when we do that, and it's simply for the debt service of that year. But there's other GO debt that's outstanding for TIDS and water and other utilities that you could take an adjustment for because it's general obligation debt.
How does that affect? Let's just for discussion say that we do that. That doesn't have like an effect for us this time next year when we're talking about the 23 budget in impacting our levy limit then, correct?
Correct. Because it's an adjustment outside of your levy, it does not impact it next year. You could go back to the minimum. You could keep, an extra 25 or 50,000 to put towards capital projects, as long as you have more capacity of that GO debt, which you do. We have up to, I think this year it's 1.2 million you could go to, which obviously you would never do that. But we're taking 211,000, so we're very conservative with that. So that is an option when you need to get some capital projects done to utilize that debt through an adjustment, because you.
I have some hesitation on doing that. We've been affected by the whole COVID thing. I mean, I don't know that we're, not necessarily kind of looking at the scenario with all the citizens within the community having a certain amount of impact as well. I want to do anything in adjustment of levy if we can, if we have the opportunity to capture that 117,000 through general fund and put it toward the capital projects. I just feel a little more comfortable about that, knowing that we have that surplus there.
No, I agree with you, Scott. I didn't understand if it was actually changing how much we're levying versus it's shuffling things around. So that clarifies for me, Eileen. I mean, I think given where we're at, we have been conservative with our surplus, and I think that's where we would put it towards this. And then, capital is one of those things that we can easily put a pause on in the middle of the year if we need to and do a budget amendment.
You're breaking up quite a bit, Matt. I don't know if it's maybe a distance from the speaker.
I'll try one more time. I agree with what you said about the debt levy. So Eileen clarified my question. I would say use the surplus fund. We've been conservative with it. Capital is one of those things that when we look at the bids that come in, we can put a pause if we need to and do a budget amendment.
I think another thing I should note with the surplus funds as well is last year in the general fund, we were above our policy for unassigned surplus funds. So we will have the ability to do a transfer to capital. That's what we've done historically. If we do have surpluses in the general fund, we eventually transfer those to capital, and that's the best use of those funds. And we have about 200,000 that will have the. I thought that was important to note, so you realize that will help with that. The other thing is in Eller's projections, I think next year is kind of a capital-heavy year where he was predicting a little bit of a deficit, and beyond that, they're not predicting the deficit.
What percentage would that leave us at for?
We always stay at 35% unassigned, and right now we are over the 35%. So I calculated to be at the 35%, we have over 200,000 we could transfer.
Then I think that answers it in my mind.
100%, I agree, Matt. I think that just, if you're comfortable with that as well, Jason?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean,
You're the one,
my only
you're the one
concern,
that's really
Jason.
involved with these capital projects, so.
Yeah, the only other thing I was gonna mention up is we did budget 25 grand, and now that's a smaller amount, over the next 4 years to update all our street lighting to LEDs. But you gotta remember, if we were to cut that out, that's kinda helping us on the operation side of things as they change out those LEDs, so.
Yeah. So Jason, I just from a work standpoint want to make sure that this is a punch list of work that you think that you guys can actually get accomplished and not be overwhelmed.
I do think so. I know we're gonna have a couple things that are gonna carry over into 2022 from 21, and I feel good about it. So I think we can, we can handle everything we have on our plate now and what we're looking at here today.
Okay.
The thing I was asking for direction on is the salary assumptions, and that's a hard topic for me to broach right now, knowing that we had a capital shortage. But I don't feel like I'd be doing my job if I didn't bring it to the board's attention that we had the 1% for salary structure increase. I did look at what Carlson Detman was predicting for the average structural increase, 55%. We know the employment pressure. I just want to get direction from board if you want to leave it as is, if you want us to incorporate anything different. I did provide the costs in my memo of 0.5%. Anybody need me to explain?
Do you have enough then to go off of not hearing anything from us about that 0.5%? All
I mean,
and employee retention.
I feel like that a lot of what we've got going on in this budget is like we're at this inflection year where we don't quite have TID 3 yet, and yet we don't get the levy limit increase that we need. And then for our employees, you know, inflation's obviously a factor for everybody. So that's tough. I mean, I would, you know, what are your thoughts, Eileen, on trying to do a catch up, you know, in the next year in the 2023 budget?
I have mixed feelings. I feel like you do. I mean, obviously, I have concerns about the revenue situation. I mean, this is the type of stuff that keeps me awake at night, levy limits, and how do you keep good employees? So I have the same concerns. We're in a tough spot this year. I guess, you know, my concern is that if we say, okay, we're going to wait till 2023, or, you know, when I should say when TID 3 closes, that we do something and we stand behind that, because it's, I think, you know, for employees, it's going to be hard for them to understand. They don't understand the financial aspects like I do.
Yeah.
Jason, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I just think you hit it on the head. If that's what we're sitting here talking about tonight, I think we definitely need to be sitting here next year at this time having that very same discussion. It can't fall off the radar.
Eileen, I see you've got like you know, the cost for each 0.5% for the number of employees in there, but do you have like the total?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If you would increase the, you know, if you adjust the structure itself from 1% to 1.5%, it will add $4,450 to the wage costs, which is $3,380 to the levy. So that's for every 0.5% increase to the adjustment to the salary structure, and then for every 0.5% increase to wages for the people, I put merit, but it's performance range, it's $1,760.17. I couldn't tell you how much of that was levy just because of the way that's broken out. So those are the financial impacts of changing those salary adjustments. One of the other things we could contemplate is we did include 10% in the budget for health insurance increases. If by some miracle those come in less, I'm concerned about the health insurance because, as I shared, we're being recategorized to a large group, and now we go through underwriting again. It's based on our group's experience rates. But the difference between large group and small group is that large group rates are a little more negotiable, so our broker can hopefully go to bat for us and negotiate a rate, whereas small group rates, it's whatever it comes in at is what.
Well, just clarifying this, at this point, the average is at 2.3% increase, looking at a potential 1.5%.
No. So what it is each position on the salary structure has a beginning and ending range. There's 6 steps. And when we adjust the salary structure, we're taking that range, the beginning and ending and steps, and we're adding 1% to that. So we're trying to keep up with inflation, because what has happened historically is we get behind and then we do a salary study and find out that we're way behind on our wages for our positions. So we try to adjust that each year, like for a cost of living adjustment. Beyond the 6th step, you have the merit range, where somebody's considered to be at what is considered to be 100% of pay for their position. That is, if we've with the salary structure. So beyond that, that's where we say in that performance range, they're going to get that 2%. So people who are in that range get whatever that performance range is, provided they're meeting expectations. They have the ability to withhold some if they're not. And the same as the people in the step range. So typically in the step range, you're starting somebody potentially at 80% of their position or 85%. So the plan is that wherever you start them at, that they would move up a step every year. So in that range, they get bigger increases. The average is more like 3% because they're going up those steps to get to that 100% after they've been here for an adequate amount of time, or because they came. That help explain it?
I actually better understand this now that I'm a government employee. So you've got 1% on the pay grade range. right?
Correct. So everything on that pay scale gets rolled up 1%.
Okay. And so if someone did not, they would get their, I went from step 2 to step 3, they would also get whatever that 1% increase was to step 3.
Correct, which usually works out to be about a 3% increase.
So they have about a 2% jump in between the steps, and then they get the extra percent there. And you've got what for performance or merit for people who are outside of the band? Sorry if you said something, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, our connection's not the best tonight. 2%?
2% on outside the band?
Correct.
And I'm sorry, on the average, you said talking to the peers, it was 2.3% for what?
That was the Carlson Detman, the average predicted increase based on, they survey, all the employers. So for public employers, the salary structure.
I'm sorry.
I guess, I also look at CPI, which was.
I missed the actual important part there. Sorry, say that one more time.
Carlson, I usually gather the Carlson Detman. So Carlson Detman, the average public sector structural increase was projected to be 2.35 for public sector. In addition, I kind of monitor the chatter on like the city managers group stuff. So I am seeing higher than I've seen in quite a while, but I also am seeing other municipalities in the same predicament as us going, we have to hold wages to a certain amount because of our revenue constraints.
How many people do we have outside the band?
I cannot answer that at the moment. I certainly can get that for the next meeting.
I guess I'm just trying to understand the number of people that we're impacting on each side of it. Because I'm not sure, I'm going to say something here that I'm not sure I personally entirely agree with, but an argument could be made that if you're outside the band, you're outside the market range. And so, yes, there's inflation and we'll try to do something, but maybe not as much as we might do for somebody who is still within the market range.
Didn't we have that problem once before, back about 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, and we played catch-up to try and make sure that we
Yeah,
could
but I
maintain
mean-
our employees.
Okay, I mean, I remember we did something else too, but, it was just a short term trying to make sure that the employees were kept fair. Did a bonus thing or something.
So Eileen, I guess let's just say let's say that we did 2% for people in the band and 2% for people outside. From an operational deficit standpoint, what would we be trying to close? Is it a few $1,000s? Is it tens of thousands of dollars? Is that and I know you were talking about looking at the health insurance, but I mean, are we debating here over $10,000-$15,000 and across the whole budget?
So, in my memo, I had said that if you want to adjust the structure for every 0.5%, it increases, it costs $4,450. $3,380 comes from the levy. So if you went from 1% to 2%, it would be $7,700 from levy and almost $9,000 in increase.
And you'd need to go plug that somewhere else?
We would have to, update our wage and benefit spreadsheet, which then we have to update the whole budget document, which from Excel and blah.
Yeah, but I mean, to close that addition,
Oh, I see what you're saying. You would probably have to take it from capital and put that levy into general unless we decide we want to try to cut something in general, but the operations at this point are pretty tight. Or we have to try to find a new source of revenue, which I don't think is a favorable proposition.
Well, I don't think we're gonna find a new.
So we're talking about a $200,000, pulled from, talking about a $117,000 deficit in the budget. That's outside of whatever wages are. So we're talking about $83,000 maybe available toward something like that. If we were to capture the full $200,000 from capital projects, adjust the budget to pull all funds from our standard levy, right? Or a majority of it. Still be fine because we're still below that 35%, or we're still above that 35% threshold for surplus funds.
Yeah, Scott, that's true, but what I'm worried, capital is in theory a one-time thing unique to each project. This would be funding day-to-day operations from that surplus. And I'm a little bit concerned.
I'm actually not saying to do that. I'm saying, okay. Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm saying to actually take the full 200,000, putting it toward capital projects, which would alleviate $200,000 from our total budget to then reallocate it via levy funds and everything else toward wages as a standard operation.
I see. So are you suggesting that capital show, for the purposes of this memo, a larger deficit because not as much is directed to capital, more is directed to operations?
Exactly.
Okay, then I agree with you.
So I'm still not clear. Should I leave it as assumed, or do you want?
Well,
I understand what we're saying, where to get the money, but I'm not hearing any clear direction on whether we just leave the assumptions or.
I would say at the dollar amounts that we're talking about, and given that we have CPI pressure on our employees, and we want to have great quality employees, which we have, and we want to continue to keep them. You know, and if the market is what you're hearing is 2.3%, I would say do 2.5%.
I would agree with that 100%.
Okay, so to make sure I'm understanding, 2.5% cost of living adjustment to the structure, 2%, keep the 2% increase in the performance range, correct?
I'd do 2.5 on the performance range too.
Anybody have any concerns with that?
Yeah, I'm just I remember from our past discussion and performance from starting out at the bottom and working your way up. I'm thinking 2.5 might be a little steep for some of the higher echelons that you're going to get into.
But she's already calculated that out here.
It was calculated 2%, wasn't it?
For every 0.5% increase in wages for those within the merit range, it increases the budgeted amount by $17.62.
Correct. It does increase it by $17.62. And I know what 40 is referring to. It was a prior board who had discussed the concerns that the higher paid individuals, when they get the same percentage as the lower paid individuals, get a higher increase. So at that time, the prerogative was to give higher paid individuals less percentage and do a portion as bonus to try to hold those wages so they weren't.
Well, I don't know. In my mind, though, CPI, I mean, we say CPI is 3%. Inflation's more than that because they take out cost of energy and other things. So I think we try to do what we can for all of our employees.
I have no problem leaving it across the board.
Okay, I think I got my direction, so I will incorporate those items. Sorry, I know that was a painful discussion. CDA fund, the 12,000 budgeted for the facade grant, are we all okay with that remaining?
Is that gonna be enough?
I think that CDA would like to see more, but we do have money in reserves for them, so once we add that to the reserves, I think they have like 103. We could always, you know, if we end up with a year with a surplus, that's where they got that money. We had a year with a surplus, and we said, hey, we had a good year this year. We had a surplus, let's designate.
I mean, if we
I think
see
a lot
what
more
we get as
discretionary.
responses, as applications, I think, and we see what that comes in at. I'd leave it.
I think you're far away from the mic again.
Sorry, I would leave it. And, you know, if we got a bunch of great applications for 15,000, then we'll adjust it later.
I think I have everything I need. Is there anything else the board wants us to bring back with the next look at the budget?
But Joe, you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
You wanna
if
come?
anybody had any questions about the fire district increases, Joe and I can answer those. Our new fire chief is here.
Joe, why don't you come on up to the podium,
Yeah.
introduce yourself, and field any questions.
Nice to meet everyone here tonight, outside of the few that I do know on the board here. I am the interim fire chief now for the East Troy Fire Department, Joe DeGaro. I was previously the rescue captain and service director. I'm still withholding those roles for now as we move through this process that we're going through now, whole learning curve up here. I'm willing to answer any questions you got. I know I threw big numbers this year, but we're trying to play a little catch up ourselves on where we fell short in previous years on things, so, and it's kind of catching up with us now.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that the biggest increase we have is in rescue operations, and that's because we have to add 2 more full-time people. The number of rescue calls has gone up almost 50% in the last 5 years, staggering. And the point is, we've got 24-hour coverage some of the time.
Yes.
You know, we're getting almost, half of, well, a little less than half of our calls during the time when we don't have all of that coverage, 24-hour coverage. And it affects the time to actually respond. I mean, the time to respond when we do have coverage is...
I averaged it out just over the last 2 months, and I can dive deeper into that, but I've been on duty for 4 days. So forgive me on getting some of those numbers for you. But over the last 2 months, averaging out the time response when we are staffed with 2 members for the AMBO crew is 58 seconds. When we are not staffed, which is generally the Monday through Friday time slot after 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next morning, which comes out to an average of 7 minutes out the door time. And when we look at that, especially, I was an AHA CPR instructor, still am, but after 10 minutes, we don't have feasible, savable life. So when we think about our village response time, when we do get out the door, is anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes in the village, and then reaching out further into Troy, Center, Lafayette. Now we're looking at anywhere from a 10 to 15 minute response time, that, you know, out the door to the scene. So when we're looking at a 7 minutes before we can even get that ambo going, no, it's not a very good outcome for us there, or that family. So we want to better serve the community, especially with this increase in call volume that we have been experiencing over the last 5 years.
I'll just say I went through the budget with John and Barb Church, and so I think Joe, you guys have done a good job of reflecting the changes that you need to make, and I'm sorry I'm not there to congratulate you in person.
Matt?
One question I had was, there was that one budget item in capital for 36. we weren't anticipating this year, and I guess the question, and maybe it's not, as we move forward to accumulate funds not only for fire trucks, but like things like over years, because it's often low to our budget, because it's a shock, right?
Absolutely.
And I understand that things come up by surprise for us. So please don't take that as a type of scenario, but I think if we can plan for those purchases, if we can work together to plan for those and do more accumulating funds, that helps us to.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest changes I do want to make moving forward, and actually get a 10-year layout on some of these expenditures that can be forecasted that far out.
Like hoses, air packs, things like
Yes.
you have to turn, timely, just like the police department has to change out their vests every 5 years?
Absolutely. So that's what I'm definitely going to be working towards, especially heavily over this next year, on getting that laid out.
Great, that would be.
One other thing though, that hopefully then if you get an increase in department personnel, you may have to increase a couple of those items for the equipment, right?
Yes, that's being taken into consideration with all moves made at this point in time.
Eileen, have you been able to figure out a chargeback method?
No, I haven't been able to work on that because I was so focused on this budget, but I plan to look at that this week, and I really like your suggestion regarding the number of employees.
Okay, yeah, if you want to bounce anything off me, let me know.
Will do.
Thanks, Joe, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Eileen, I do appreciate all the efforts you put into this, make it clearer to some of us non-financial people.
Thank you. I hope it's clear. I felt pretty bad throwing an 81-page packet at you, and that's just for the budget.
All right, moving on to ordinances and resolutions. Resolution 2021-19, final resolution levy special assessment for Church Street, Main Street, and Village Square.
I want to note, there is one property called out on that schedule you're approving that I am not having you approve with it, 2938 Main Street. There were some changes to whether or not the sanitary lining would take place, so the sanitary lining was not on the schedule for that property at that public hearing, so we'd like to remove that and hold a separate public hearing. There's also, I think, 2 additional properties we anticipate will increase. You're approving them at the level they're at currently, which is not a change from August 23rd. If those do increase, we will also have a public hearing for those. We are hoping to do that at the first meeting in November.
After our last meeting, did we have any other recalculations or errors that we found?
I don't think there were there.
I think just the 2938 Main is the only one since our last meeting.
Okay.
That nothing has increased from what it was on 823, other than the 2938.
We are waiting back for some numbers from the contractor for a couple of properties, though, just for clarification.
I will make a motion to approve resolution 2021-19.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to reports. Verbal update on Main Street, Square Project, Church Street, and cost tracking update. Jason?
Okay, so, again, some good progress in the last couple of weeks. We literally are gonna turn the corner tomorrow and start putting the square back together. The concrete contractor mobilized this afternoon, and they're gonna start finish grading tomorrow for curb. Hopefully, we're pouring some curb by the end of the week. They're saying that they'll pour the majority of the curb on the square in 2 days. So hopefully it looks a lot different by the weekend and early next week. contractors completed all the storm sewer work, including Church Street, so now Church Street they can begin to remove the rest of the asphalt and start grading that for curb line. After curbs in, then, outdoor light comes back in and starts working on the conduits for the street lighting, and then the contractor starts on sidewalk. So it's starting to come back together downtown as well. As you know, both sides of the square are paved, striped. Stop signs are back up, and more signs are going up this week. Restoration has been done. There's some repairs that are gonna need to be done there, some work that's gonna need to be done over. I think those are the high points for that project. Is
the village putting in the pedestrian crossing down by Energy Drive?
Not with this project. So what we put in were the approaches or the curb cuts and the ADA ramp right behind the curb, but the crosswalk is not going in because there's no walk to go to at this point. So with the State Highway 20 project in 23 or 24, we're putting the sidewalk extension in from basically at the bank around the corner around Shell 220, and then I figure that's when we'll do crosswalk.
I noticed they even gapped the yellow street lines for the crosswalk.
Yeah, they were gonna paint the crosswalk, and it's like, there's no point in painting that crosswalk, so.
I did like that there are a few crosswalks that appeared that used to not be there.
That's correct. Hopefully in the next coming years, there will be crosswalks and walks to those crosswalks.
Well, I was just thinking, down by the square on the east side there, what is that? Over there by the post office, there's a crosswalk there that if it was there, it was not very legible.
Yeah, it was not there, but currently it really doesn't go anywhere. It's another one like 40 mentioned up by Energy Drive, but it's a future crosswalk for sure.
Yeah.
All right, any questions about emergency service minutes from 8:19? Any questions about the budget and closed session meeting from 9:2? Okay, moving on to verbal update for multi-use trail. Jason?
So that one, actually, 40 alluded to it earlier. What we had is a culvert that's going to go in. That's a large pipe that's sitting there, and there was a conflict with the fiber optic line. It was too shallow. We had to have CenturyLink come in and lower it or remove it, which they've now done. And the contractor's telling us he'll be back in a couple of weeks. So we'll certainly still get asphalt in this year. I am concerned about the restoration not happening, but I can see it certainly getting rough graded for the winter months. But it'll be a couple of weeks before they're back on it.
And to point out, it's not the contractor's fault.
Correct. This was not. It was a conflict with CenturyLink. Unfortunately, they had no idea how deep their cable was. They have no as-built on it, and there was a conflict during construction. So
Most of that remediation of the landscaping, that's on village property, correct?
correct.
Look for a motion to adjourn.
Well, I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.